This morning, as we have just entered into November, so I have purposely decided to speak some. The most famous verse about Christmas, or which is very often read, is Isaiah chapter 7 verse 14, which says, Himself shall give you a sign, and behold, the virgin shall give birth to a son, and his name will be called Immanuel. And we know that this is a prophecy about Jesus Christ, which was fulfilled in Jesus Christ 2000 years ago. But originally, when this verse was told by prophet Isaiah, it was told more of a sign to King Ahaz. And a sign is something that people used to ask in those days. In fact, this is what Isaiah told King Ahaz: the virgin shall give birth to a son, and his name will be called Emmanuel. Now that makes sense to us because the prophecy has been fulfilled in Jesus Christ. But for what reason did Isaiah make this statement to King Ahaz? And prophet Isaiah himself might not have been aware that he's actually talking about the coming Messiah much later, just as David, when he said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" He probably was talking about his own situation, but it was fulfilled as a prophecy in Jesus Christ. Therefore, let's try to look at this man, King Ahaz. Why was this word given to him, and what is it that we can learn from this prophecy, and what it meant to Isaiah, and what it could mean to us this morning? King Ahaz, he was one of the kings of Judah. He probably ruled, or he ruled for 16 years, so he died at the age of 36, which is a very young age to die. Or we don't mean to say that all those who die at an early age is not good, but definitely it speaks something about this man. So as we try to study about this, and if I want to give a title to this, I thought to give the title as Victory Over Hardships through Immanuel. How do we gain victory over hardships? Through Immanuel. And that was exactly the context in which the sign, more than a prophecy at that time, was given to King Ahaz. Now here, if you see, who is this man, King Ahaz? If you look at him, now some of you may be able to see clearly, and some of you may not be. Those of you who can see, the references are all there. You may not even need to open your Bible. And now, when the best thing that the congregation can do to the pastor is give him less time and ask him to preach the best message, So I would give you an assignment today. If you don't get all those verses, it's very simple. You need to study about Ahaz, so you need to know where it's written about him. So it's written in 2 Kings chapter 16, 2 Chronicles chapter 28, and Isaiah chapter 7. So you miss any of those references, let me tell you, they're all from these chapters. So you go back and do some reading and do some assignment, and you try to get all those verses in case you have missed any of them. Now this man, King Ahaz, he was the son of Jotham, king of Judah, and he was 20 years old when he became king. Then he reigned in Jerusalem for 16 years. When he died, he was buried in the city of David. Interestingly, he was not placed in of the kings of Israel. We'll get into that why. What about his reputation? What type of a man was he? He, unlike his father David or his great-grandfather David, he did not do what was right in the sight of the Lord. Now, this is just a very simple statement, but exactly what he did was, he sacrificed his sons. He went to the extent of sacrificing his sons to other gods in the valley of Ben Hinnom. When God led the people of Israel out of Egypt, he said, you should not do the sins that they are doing in Egypt. Neither should you do the sins that of the people whom I am going to drive out of Canaan and whom you are going to occupy. So this guy was exactly doing the sins that were being done by the Canaanites at that time. Not only that, he offered sacrifices and burnt incense, and also he started to make idols for the worship of Baal. So this is the man he was. And it's not only that, he had many rivals. He had people who were waging war against him. Now there were these two countries, Syria and Israel. The northern kingdom was called Israel and the southern kingdom was called Judah, for which he was the king. And the northern kingdom, Israel, which is a sister nation of Judah, this country, this kingdom, joined hands with the Syrians and they waged a war against Judah, which is often referred to as the first Syro-Ephraimite war. Ephraim is another synonym for Israel, so that's why we say it's a Syro-Ephraimite war. In this war, there was a very heavy loss to King Ahaz. These two kings joined together and they killed 120,000 soldiers in Judah. And it's not just that, they took captives the women and children of Judah and they were going back. In fact, a prophet came at that time and told king of Israel, who was Pekah, he said, you have done a wrong thing by attacking your brother's kingdom. Give back all that you have taken. And also the Syrians, they took over some of the cities, and one of the cities was Elath, as it is written there. Not only the Syro-Ephraimite war, he was also faced with other invasions by the Edomites and invasions by the Philistines. You know, the Philistines were very often coming and attacking these people. But it doesn't end here. There was this second Syro-Ephraimite war, and the Israelites or the Ephraimites, they are coming now for a second time to wage war against Judah. And that in fact is the background. That in fact is the context for Isaiah chapter 7 verse 14. So King Rezin of Aram, Arameans is the other word for Syrians, and Pekah, king of Israel, the other name for Israel is Ephraim. So they have joined hands together in order to wage war against this King Ahaz, king of Judah, for the second time. Now you just need to look into the map for this. It's quite interesting. So you have Jerusalem over there, and you have Shomron, which is actually Samaria, which is the king of Israel, and Pekah was the king of this kingdom, king of Israel, and you have Damascus over there, which is the Syrians. So King Rezin was the king of Damascus or king of Syria. So these are the two kings who are waging war against this king. For the first time they did, and they are coming now for the second time. And of course you have the Edomites, and you also have the Philistines who are coming, who have once in a while try to attack the king of Judah. Now Syria, you are reading about Syria every now and then on the map. This is a country that was there back then. You have Damascus mentioned as early as Genesis chapter 15, because one of the servants of Abraham was from Damascus. So Damascus is still the capital city of Syria. Now the problem that you have there is a civil war. It's also a holy war. It's also a proxy war between USA and Russia, trying to have their own vested interests there. So Syria is a kingdom that's there right now, and is all the immigration problem, or the migrants are all leaving Syria. So it's very interesting to see how biblical records have been so accurate, and some of those places are there, most of the places are there geographically even today. So this is the background. Now the first thing about King Ahaz is, he was going through hardships. He was going through problems. He already had the first Syro-Ephraimite war where he met with heavy losses. Now it's for the second time he is going to face the Syro-Ephraimites. Now these hardships, dear friends, in our lives will cause disturbances. That's not a problem, because if you are not disturbed, then you are not a human being. If you are a human being, and if we have problems, I tell you, you will be disturbed. You will be disturbed, and that's for good. You need to be, you need fear, you need disturbance. So if you're worried at any point of time that you are going through a difficult situation or something like that, that's common. The problem is not your disturbance. The problem is not your disturbance. It is to what extent do you have faith in God in your difficult times. Now if you look at this man, he had disturbances. What was the problem? He was having the fear of threats. These two kings, the king of Syria, Rezin, and the king of Pekah, king of Israel, they plotted against Ahaz, and they had a very wonderful plan. They said, let us invade Judah, let us tear it apart, let us divide it among ourselves, and let us make son of Tabil king over it. Now the fourth thing is really bit interesting, because when God made King David as a king of Israel, he gave him a promise. He said, forever you will have your generation sit on the throne. Now Ahaz should not have been afraid, because these people cannot remove me as a king and make someone else as a king, because the promise to King David holds even today, even now, forever, because Jesus Christ, who is in the line of David, is sitting on the throne today. But anyway, Ahaz, whether he was very serious about it or not, we don't know. But as I said, hardships cause disturbances. That's what exactly happened to him. When he heard that the Syro-Ephraimites, or the Syrians and the Ephraimites, are coming to attack him for a second time, he and his people were shaken as the trees of the forest are shaken by the wind. Now you may have trees somewhere over here, but they don't shake much. I mean, you should go to the forest in order to see how the trees really shake, because of the wind that you have there. So the figure of speech that is used there is to show to the extent of his disturbance. He was disturbed. That's why I tell you, when we have problems, when we have enemies against us, when we have a financial situation crisis, when you have any health crisis, when you are going through any difficult situations in your life, relational problems, we are disturbed. That's not a problem. We have to be disturbed, in fact, because that's when we take the things to the Lord in prayer. So, what should he have done? I think you may say that he should have taken everything to the Lord in prayer. Well, did he do that? Now, this is the time when Isaiah came to him. Actually, he didn't go to Isaiah. Isaiah came to him. The Lord sent the prophet Isaiah to King Ahaz. This is something very interesting. If you see about King Hezekiah, who is his own son, when Hezekiah was going through problems, there is a strong contrast between King Ahaz and King Hezekiah. Hezekiah sent forward to the prophet Isaiah and said, "Pray for me. Pray for me." This is the only situation, I think, where God sent the prophet to this man, and with a 4-point message. What is the 4-point message? The first thing is, you are disturbed, I know. You are disturbed. Be careful. Be careful. And the second thing is, keep calm. And the third thing is, don't be afraid. And the fourth thing is, do not lose heart. This is the 4-point message that Isaiah gave to King Ahaz. Now, if there is anybody here who have done psychology, you might quite agree with me. This is exactly in a very good order, just as a psychologist would suggest today. You know, the first thing that you are going through when you are going through problems is not that somebody should come and say, don't be afraid. I think the best thing, or the first thing somebody should come and say is, be careful. You know why? If you are not careful, when you are emotionally disturbed, you actually lose your mental balance and you take wrong decisions in your life. So the first thing that you do when you are emotionally disturbed, when you are afraid, when you are angry, when you fall in love, don't take a decision, my friends. That's the thing, you are going to take a wrong decision. Many of you might have said, I was angry, so I said that. Maybe I should not have done that. Or maybe out of fear you have taken a wrong decision. In fact, the secular psychologists, they say if you are angry, just count from 1 to 25. Maybe that would help you to calm down, and then you take the right decision. What do you do when you are in a love affair? We call love failure. You know why? Because they are in love and they took the decision, the wrong decision. When we are emotionally disturbed, the first thing that we need to do is to be careful, because we may take wrong decisions. That's not what should not, so Isaiah was concerned, God was concerned that this guy should not be taking wrong decisions. Keep calm, don't be afraid, don't lose heart. Because Isaiah says, God is clear, guy, God's clear, man. What's God saying? God is saying, it will not take place, it will not happen. What will not take place? The Syrians and the Ephraimites who are trying to attack you and they are trying to loot you, by the way, that will not take place. It will not happen. He said, these two kings whom you are afraid of, they are just like firewood. You just keep them, we don't use firewood these days, but if you just keep them and you burn the firewood and you take it out, man, that's the thing that could be the most dangerous. But you allow it to burn, it becomes ashes, it just turns into ashes in no time. So what Prophet Isaiah is saying, these are just burning firewoods. Why are you afraid of them? In no time they will disappear. And he said, who is the head of Aram? Who is the head of Syria? Is it not Rezin? He's just a man. Who is the head of Ephraim? Who is the head of Israel? He is not just a man. He is just Pekah, king of Israel. Why are you afraid of him? And then finally he concluded by saying, if you do not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. This is very interesting. This is very interesting. This is what I would like to tell you this morning. If you are facing hardships, if you are disturbed, that's not the problem, my friends. The problem is, if you do not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. What more clear message did Ahaz want at that time from prophet Isaiah? It's all for him, it's crystal clear. It's all for him to accept the message of prophet Isaiah and then say, yes, probably I should do this. This is what I should be doing as the head of a nation. That's what you would expect that he would have done. But sadly, that's not what he did, in spite of the message being so clear. Now, when you are disturbed in your hardships and you don't have faith in God, you go into the second stage, which is actually the beginning of your downfall. You know, to be disturbed is not the issue over here, but to not have faith in God is the problem. And if you don't do that, if you don't begin to have faith in God, what happens is actually hardships cause deviation. Not just disturbance. Disturbance is not the wrong thing. But because you don't have faith in God, what happens to you is you are changing your track. You are changing your direction. You are trying to look for other sources for help. And what that makes happen in your life, what that does is, it removes your focus on God. You lost your faith. You are going to lose your focus on God, and you don't see God anymore. You see all the other alternatives around you. So when Isaiah was making this statement, or when Isaiah was trying to encourage Ahaz, he said, I think it's not very clear there, but I think Ahaz was just keeping quiet. He is not saying anything. Then again Isaiah says, it looks like you are not believing what I'm saying. It looks like you are not believing what I'm saying. Now here is it. Here is the deal. Ask the Lord for a sign. Be it in the deepest depths or in the highest heights. You ask God for a sign. Now, if I was in his place, if I still do not have the faith, then I would have said, yes, Lord, I want to ask you for a sign. I mean, any sign. But how did Ahaz respond? He said, I will not ask. I will not ask. I will not put the Lord to test. Now, who is testing whom here? In fact, the Lord is testing you. And you are trying to think, or you are trying to be over spiritual, and you are trying to tell God that you don't want to test him. It's in fact the Lord who is saying, ask for a sign. And then he says, I am not going to ask for a sign. Why? Because I don't want to put the Lord to test. This is where Isaiah loses his coolness. This is where he says, Isaiah said, listen, you house of David, is it not enough to try the patience of man? Now I come to you so many times and I say, this is what you should be doing. Be careful, be calm, don't be afraid, do not lose heart. It will not happen, it will not take place. Stand firm in your faith. If you do not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. I have been telling that to you. You are trying my patience. And he goes on to say, you are also trying the patience of God. You are also trying the patience of God. It is in this context, Prophet Isaiah wanted to bring King Ahaz back to God. He wants to shift his focus back to God. But before that, why is Ahaz saying, I will not ask? Why he is saying, I do not want to put the Lord to test? My friends, he has looked already for alternate solutions. Because this is where you should read Kings in order to understand this. King Ahaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser. Tiglath-Pileser was the then king of superpower at that time. So he sent message to Tiglath-Pileser and he said, I am your servant. I am your vassal. A vassal is somebody who pays taxes every year in order to pacify the world power so that the world power doesn't do anything to him. So he said, I am your vassal. Save me. Dear friends, when God is there to save him, when God is there to say this will not happen, when God is there to say do not be afraid, when God is there to say stand firm in your faith, otherwise you will fall, this man has already had sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser, the king of Assyria, and he says, I am your servant, I am your vassal. So shame on him. Shame on him. He is a servant of the living God. And he says, I am your servant to this worldly king Tiglath-Pileser. And he said, come and save me. Come and deliver me. Now when he did that, now this is where you should understand again. So you have Jerusalem here and you have Samaria over there and Damascus. These are where the Assyrians were, up there, top there. So the Assyrians, the Tiglath-Pileser is actually the king of Assyria and one of the most famous king, one of the founding members of the Assyrian Empire. Now he was ready to come and help King Ahaz. It's not just asking for help. What he did was, he took the silver and gold found in the temple of the Lord and sent it as a gift to the king of Assyria. Sent it, bribing him. Come, God is there to give him a free solution. Man, he's choosing a problem, he's choosing the worst solution ever, trying to spend not from his own pocket, from the temple, sending money to the king of Assyria, and then he's saying, come and save me. You know, there was a temporary solution. Most of the time when we look for alternate solutions, I tell you, we do have temporary solutions. And the king of Assyria came, and what he did was he actually killed the king of Syria, king of Rezin. He put him to death. So probably Ahaz felt that there is a temporary solution. Dear friends, when we are disturbed, that's not the problem. I told you, we need to have our faith in God. If you don't have your faith in God, then probably you are in the next step. You are deviating. You are looking for alternate solutions. And you will be in a situation where you think that alternate solutions are doing quite well. How many of you might have told in your life, I thought that he will come and help me. In fact, he did harm to me. Have you experienced like that? You know, I thought my relatives will help me. They acted as if they would come and help me, but actually they did harm to me. Outwardly he was speaking something, but from below he was speaking something else. That's what happens. I don't need to tell more on that, because we know what alternate solutions do in our lives, and they look as if there is a temporary solution. Now that's what King Ahaz was doing. He was doing that. That's why he told prophet Isaiah, I will not ask for a sign. I will not put the Lord to test. Now this is where Isaiah gets sort of irritated. I think he lost his temper, and then he tries to again give this strong sign and then try to bring him back to focus his attention on God. In this context he says, you don't want a sign? The Lord himself will give you a sign. You don't want a sign? The Lord himself will give you a sign. What is that sign? That is the sign that we are talking about. The virgin shall give birth to a son, and his name will be called Immanuel. Now, most of the time when we do Bible study or we read our Bibles, we don't want to read even one verse before, neither do we want to read a verse that is after. You know, that's the main problem in Bible study. In fact, you think I'm telling story, I'm just reading all those verses are from Isaiah chapter 7. So I'm just coming from Isaiah chapter 1 and I have just come to Isaiah chapter 14. So it's nothing that I have told on my own. I'm just trying to look at it in the historical and the geographical context here. So when he said, I do not want a sign, that's when the Lord said, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Now the sign doesn't end there, because it continues. This child has to be born, because the next verse says, he will eat curds and honey when he knows enough to reject wrong and choose the right. But before the boy knows enough to reject wrong and choose the right, the land of the two kings you dread will be laid waste. So it's not just this boy Emmanuel will be born. It also matters that the child should be born and should grow old enough, or at least 2 years. That is the sign. That before 2 years, these two kings whom you are afraid of, they will be no more. So it's the continuation of the sign. Now here you may ask, so was Immanuel born at that time? Because it's not just a sign that we are talking about that he should be born, because he should be born and also he should at least come to the age of 2, because that's the sign that the two kingdoms will be destroyed. No, it never happened. It never happened. It would have happened if Ahaz asked for the sign. You get what I'm saying? Ahaz never asked for that sign. The Lord himself gave Ahaz this sign, and Ahaz never asked, what would have happened if this sign was fulfilled? Nothing. Because he is already a man who has left God, he has forsaken God, and he is going in his own way, he has alternate solutions, he is on the wrong track. So there is no need for this prophecy or this sign to have fulfilled at that time. There's something else very interesting. Probably God gave Isaiah not as a sign, but he gave Isaiah something else in chapter 8 verse 3 to 4 we see. Then I went to the prophetess, and she conceived and gave birth to a son. And the Lord said to me, name him Maher-shalal-Hash-Baz. Before the boy knows how to say my father or my mother, the wealth of Damascus and the plunder of Samaria will be carried off by the king of Assyria. So there's something else that the Lord showed to Isaiah, because maybe Isaiah may ask, you have given this sign, what happened? Nothing is happening. Or maybe it's for that reason or why, we don't know. But there is some other sign, not a sign, but something else that was given to Isaiah himself in 8 verse 3. You will have a son. You give him this name, and before the son says my father or my mother, these two kingdoms will go. So there are actually two signs given at that time. One to King Ahaz, which never happened. One to Isaiah, just to confirm that what he told King Ahaz will actually take place. So dear friends, when you are facing hardships, to be disturbed is not the problem. But you need to have faith in God. If you don't have that, then you probably are deviating in your hardships. And when you deviate, what actually happens to you is you are losing your focus in God. That's exactly what happened to King Ahaz. That's exactly what Isaiah wanted to take King Ahaz back to the attention of God. But as you know, as I just mentioned to you about his reputation, that will never happen. It never happened. So he actually went into the third step in his life. His own hardships caused his downfall. His own hardships caused his downfall, and he was living at that stage without the fear of God. If you are disturbed, have faith in God. Otherwise, you will deviate, because you lose your focus in God. And you keep continuing to deviate, that's actually your downfall, because you have no fear of God in your life. That's what happened to King Ahaz. Now if you look at his downfall here, this man, Tiglath-Pileser, he gave, and what's interestingly written about Tiglath-Pileser is that he came, but he gave him more trouble instead of help. This is what happens to alternate solutions. He came and he acted like as if he's putting the Syrian king to death, but actually he gave him more trouble than help. And it's also written about this man that in spite of receiving all the things from the temple as gifts, it did not help him. Alternate solutions, they don't help us. They don't help us. We are just deviating in the wrong direction. Now that's when, this man, Tiglath-Pileser, he came to Damascus. He came to Damascus and said, I am going to help you. And he asked King Ahaz, you also come to Damascus. I just showed you on the map where Damascus is. It's the capital city of Syria. So Tiglath-Pileser had come from Assyria to Damascus, and Ahaz had come from Judah to Damascus to meet this man, his savior, his so-called savior. But see the crookedness of Ahaz there. When he went to Damascus, he saw an altar. He saw an altar, and then he thought, maybe it's because of this altar that the Arameans, the Syrians, are able to come and attack me over and over again. So what he did, he actually went there to meet Tiglath-Pileser, but when he saw the altar, he called for his high priest, a priest named Uriah, and then he said, come, and he gave the whole sketch of the whole altar, and he said, go and build this altar in Jerusalem. See, you are living at a time, it's your downfall, and he has no more fear of God in his life. So he took the sketch of this altar from Damascus, he sent it to Jerusalem, and this Uriah was a very good helper to King Ahaz. In fact, before King Ahaz went to Syria, Uriah had already constructed that altar. And this man, he comes, King Ahaz comes, he offers his sacrifices on that altar. It's not just that, he said, because the gods of the Arameans, the Syrians have helped them. That's why I am building this altar in Jerusalem, so that their gods may help me also. And then he said, he shut the doors of the temple. You just imagine, this is the temple of the Lord built by King Solomon. He shut the temple and he built that altar everywhere in Jerusalem. That is to the level of idolatry, fear of God. Without the fear of God, King Ahaz was living in his time. You know what he should have done? He should have had the fear of God. But it's written about him, in his trouble, King Ahaz became even more unfaithful to the Lord. In his trouble, King Ahaz became even more unfaithful to the Lord. Some people get into bad habits. And you ask them, why are you into these bad habits? They say that, no, because I want to forget some things. Drugs looks like it can help people to forget certain things. Actually when you are going through hardships, if you don't have faith in God, if you don't have your focus on God, if you don't have the fear of God, and you are looking for alternate solutions which do have a temporary answer to your problems, what actually happens is you will actually be becoming more and more unfaithful to the Lord. Your own hardships will cause your downfall. Let that not happen to us. Let not our hardships cause our downfall. That's what happened to King Ahaz. So, what have we learned from King Ahaz? The thing is, hardships cause disturbances. We need to have faith in God. The problem is, we may have fear of threat from enemies or financial crisis or health crisis, whatever it may be. We may be disturbed. We may have total disheartenment and we may feel worthless. But the action is, have faith in God. And you are not proper in this step, you are probably falling down into the next step where your hardships cause your deviation and you lose your focus of God. What actually happens is you are choosing not to have faith in God and you are looking for alternate solutions. Therefore, you lose your focus of God. And if you don't set right yourself here and go back and put your faith in God, actually your hardships will cause your downfall. Because at that stage, you no longer have the fear of God in your life. You reject God as your helper. And that is really the downfall. It is written about King Ahaz that he had a downfall. He and the whole Jerusalem with him. The action, have the fear of God in our lives. Dear friends, the simple message this morning is, Immanuel means God is with us. Immanuel means what? God is with us. That's simply in fact what Prophet Isaiah wanted to tell King Ahaz. He said, God is with you, brother. God is with you. God is with you. And he gave him that lengthy message, the 4-point message. Be careful. Keep calm. Don't be afraid. Don't lose heart. But that meant nothing to Ahaz. Today for us, this Emmanuel was born 2000 years ago. He is there with us. If he is there with us, if he is there in us, the same message that Prophet Isaiah gave to King Ahaz is applicable to us. Be careful. Keep calm. Don't be afraid. Don't lose heart whenever you are going through hardships in your life. You don't follow this, then your disturbances will lead to your deviation and your deviation will lead to your downfall. On the other hand, have faith in God. You don't have that, you lose your focus in God. Once you do that, you lose the fear of God in your life and you are, for what? Fit for nothing. That's why it's written about him, he was not placed along with the other kings. A sad ending. Young man, just 36 years old. This is again what the Lord is saying to us. If Immanuel is with us, the Lord is telling the same thing what Prophet Isaiah said. If you do not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. If you want to celebrate Christmas, this is what I would like to tell you. If Immanuel is with you, stand firm in your faith. If you do not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. Be careful. Be calm. Don't be afraid. Don't lose heart. I do not know. You may be sitting here with a lot of problems in your lives. You may be sitting with hardships in your life. Immanuel is with us. God is with us. Be careful. Just keep calm. Don't be afraid. Don't lose heart. Stand firm in your faith. If you do not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. May you have the victorious life with Emmanuel And I wish you all a happy Christmas, because I may not be here, I guess, on the 25th. So have a blessed Christmas, and may the Lord encourage you through the message of Prophet Isaiah, which he gave to King Ahaz. For him it was useless. Let it be fruitful in our lives. Amen. Praise the Lord.